Hello, this is Kristin Fontana, and I'm here today to discuss Venus retrograde square the nodes. I am a graduate of the Jeffrey Wolf Green School of Evolutionary Astrology, so we'll be discussing Venus from this perspective. Back in May, I was here talking about Mars retrograde in the sign of Aquarius. And today I'll be discussing Venus retrograde. This past summer, we had 6 retrograde planets. 3 have finally moved direct: Mars, Mercury, Saturn. And we have Pluto moving direct the end of September. But just as Mars clears its shadow, which means it will recover the steps it lost during the retrograde, which will be the first week of October, Venus will be moving, retrograde, like a passing of the baton. So the question becomes, why is it set up like this? Why is this happening? What are we supposed to do with this kind of energy just when Mars started to get its legs back? Venus moves retrograde. So, in the world of relationships, which we think about, when we think about Venus, we think about love. We think about relationships, our relationship to others, our relationship to the world, our relationship to ourselves. And in the world of relationships, we may not always attract the love that we want, but as souls on this evolutionary journey, we'll always attract the love that we need and the experience that we need in order to evolve. We're approaching a karmic crossroads with respect to our loving connections, as well as with anything that holds value and meaning to us. And what holds value to you now may very well not be what held value to you even 2 years ago, or perhaps even a couple months ago. And if you're not getting what you need with the ones you love or with the ones you are with, the next 2 months will prove to be a game changer, or at least a serious reevaluation period. Now, the other point to remember is that we all attract people or partners that do reflect the dynamics that we are working on. So if something is coming up for you and you're feeling a spike in energy and an intensity within certain connections, remember the lesson and the teaching with Mars retrograde in Aquarius. Try and take a step back and observe what's coming up for you so you can deal with what's coming up head on and confront it Scorpio style and finally purge it and deal with it for good. I want to mention a few of the transits right now because Venus will not be retrograde until October 5th. Venus just moved into the sign of Scorpio on September 9th and is moving into to a square to the nodal axis this Saturday, September 15th. The transits right now and through September 22nd are very volatile and unpredictable. Hurricane Florence is a perfect example of that on our planet. But it's really important to remember, while you may be feeling anxious or stressed out or waiting for something to happen, like being on the edge of your seat. I know I have a lot of clients that have been emailing me just panicked, and a lot of clients that are having issues in their relationships right now, not a surprise. And so it's important to remember, though, and this is what I always teach, whether it's in the forecast that I'm writing or a newsletter, that no matter what is going on astrologically, how immense or stressful it is, there will always be a way through. There's always a channel. There's always a way through whatever is coming up for us. And transiting Saturn right now is moving direct and is transiting Uranus still in the sign of Taurus. So remember to lean on what is working for you and what is trying to support the change that your soul needs at this time. It's an incredible aspect, and it's very rare. I don't even know how long ago Saturn and Uranus were forming this trine, because 84 years ago, Uranus was in this position, but Saturn was not. So it was probably hundreds of years ago when we had this kind of energy to support through these earth elements the kind of change that we need on earth. Now, Venus has to do with what feels good on earth, what feels good in our body, what feels good with others, whether it's a touch, an embrace, what tastes good, what sounds good. This is all Venus. This is very, very much a human thing. And so Venus is also a very temporary thing in many cases. And so I want to do a little bit of a review on the nature of Venus, because it really does mean a lot of things. And this transit's not going to play out for everybody in the same way. So when we have a more holistic understanding of the archetype, it'll help to guide you through this period. One thing I wanted to add is that Venus is retrograde for 6 weeks, starting October 5th. And Venus is retrograde every 18 months, and it's the most rare of all the planets to go retrograde. So if you have a Venus retrograde natally, it's more rare than having the other planets retrograde. And Venus will square the nodal axis while being retrograde, and I'll show the chart in a bit on October 30th. So, but right now we've got Venus moving direct in the sign of Scorpio, and we'll be squaring the nodes this weekend while it's moving direct. So let's go to the next slide. This is probably a familiar image for a lot of you if you study evolutionary astrology. And this is the symbol for the soul's essential needs. Your essential needs are reflected in the second house, which is a Taurus house, as well as your needs in relationship to others, as seen in the seventh house. It's a house of relationships. So Venus rules Taurus, and it rules the sign of Libra. Now Venus is going to be, through transit, Venus is going to be somewhere on the wheel for you, making a square to the nodes, and that's going to show you what is up for you relative to this particular transit. Venus moves pretty quickly, but of course we're going to have a retrograde, so it's going to make 3 passes at this point in your chart. Now the second house, or the Taurus side of Venus, symbolizes the needs that your soul is learning how to satisfy for itself. This is all about self-reliance. And the natural inconjunct that we see between the second house and the seventh house describes the projected needs onto others that your soul feels like you need but cannot satisfy for yourself. Now this leads to a paradoxical crisis, because we all want to feel self-reliant, but it creates this inner sense of lack. It's a gibbous phase inconjunct. And so the soul will project its needs onto another in order to feel complete. And the projected needs that we have will lead to expectations. The projected needs then become the basis for conditional love or conditional giving. I will love you if. Both houses are obviously naturally ruled by Venus, and the second house, the Taurus house, represents the inner side of Venus, and the seventh house ruled a Libra rulership is the outer side of Venus. The second house also connects to your inner magnetism. So what it is that you're projecting out to the world or to others, if you are looking for a relationship or just being in the world, what it is that your soul is saying about who you are, the energy that you are emanating, and how you attract other people via the seventh house, a Libra house, as it relates to what it is that you need. Something I remember learning in the school about the seventh house really blew me away, because when you're counseling people and maybe a client will discuss all these issues they're having in a relationship, and oftentimes I'll ask a client, what was it that attracted you to that person from the beginning? Because inevitably the relationships will change. So in essence, it's the feeling of love that is ignited at the beginning of an attraction to another that is intentional. It's supposed to draw your soul to that other person. So the evolutionary and karmic reasons that any soul has relative to its ongoing evolutionary journey can be met. So when you look back in your life and you remember being really attracted to somebody and maybe the relationship just went south over time, all of that, the pheromones or whatever else is going on at that time is intentional, really set out by the soul. So you can come back together with that person and either work through whatever was unfinished in another time or bring the souls together enough so a relationship can be established. And so then you can choose at some point to either culminate that relationship or continue it further and forward into this life and beyond, perhaps. We all make a choice at some point to either culminate or continue our relationships with people. And Venus and Scorpio squaring the nodes is such a perfect example of this. Karmic connections from the past, unresolved dynamics with others, even in some cases friendships or friends turning into lovers. Many things are playing out under this transit for people. Now, another point of this diagram that I want to bring up is that this is an inherent symmetry in terms of, you can see it's called a yod, a natural yod, and we call it the finger of God, and it's pointing to the 7th house. Now, there's a natural sextile from the 2nd house to the 12th house that reflects this easy breezy aspect that says, anytime you turn in or tune in to yourself, there is an ease of connection to that which created you. The higher octave of Venus is Neptune, otherwise known as God, divine, or creator. We all want to know where we came from. We all want to know who our mother was or is, and we all want to know who created us. So there's always this natural entry point, an ease of entry into the unknown for us. Yet when we are human, or souls having a human experience, we naturally look outside of ourselves when we can't feel complete within ourselves. And herein lies the stress through the inconjunct, because ultimately there's nothing outside of us that can complete us. The other side of the inconjunct from the 7th house to the 12th house is when we want to put our partners up on a pedestal, or we have an ideal of what we want our partner to look like or to be. And inevitably they will fall short. They will fall off that pedestal. And we are disillusioned by our own projections or our own fantasies of perfection. So we always get thrown back on ourselves, back to the 2nd house, and then back through the sextile to the 12th house when we are searching for ultimate meaning and ultimately unconditional love. All right, so I want to give you an example as well. We've got, and without throwing up a chart and sharing a bunch of astrology where the mind just kind of gets caught up in all that, trying to figure this or that out. I just want you to just take Venus squaring the nodes and imagine it. Imagine this archetype. Venus is in Scorpio. We all know what that's about. The intensity that comes with Venus and Scorpio, the need to get to the bottom of anything. That karmic kind of energy where you feel like I've got to get to the center of this. There could be all sorts of fears even that come up with Venus and Scorpio squaring the nodes. Fears of loss, betrayal, abandonment. There's trust issues that surface. The transiting South Node in Aquarius has to do with, in some cases, unresolved trauma linked with loss of partners in the past. And this could be triggering a past life when you lost a partner. It doesn't have to be about this life. Remember, the nodes too are lunar nodes. They're emotional points. And so this is going to activate deep emotion in all of us. And so, of course, with the South Node in Aquarius, if somebody has this natally, they're not going to be running into any relationship wide open and vulnerable. There's going to be some detachment because of the trauma perhaps in the past. It may have been so bad and so traumatic that they swore they would never love again. Absolute heartbreak, whether it's through a betrayal or through a death. And so the soul says, there is no way I can begin to even experience this again. I need to separate myself from the experience. Ultimately, there's an attempt to separate from the emotional body, and it doesn't mean that they're not sensitive or emotional. It's just a way of coping, a way of surviving. But we all know that we can't stay there for long. We can't evolve in any other way than getting in the water, that water trine. And the only way to evolve really is through relationships, becoming vulnerable with others. And so with the water trine, it's that Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces archetype, that triangle of energy that we must re-enter. We can't stay in an Aquarian place and ever hope to evolve. I had this client I'll never forget, and she called me for a reading, and she shared with me this devastating breakup that she had, that she was so in love with this man. He was going to be a doctor, and he left her at the altar. And she was just devastated. And she said to me, you know, Kristin, I finally feel ready to find love again, or I finally feel ready to be in a partnership. And I said, okay, well, my first concern was making sure that she didn't jump in too fast, right? Like, I don't want this to be some rebound. So my first question was, well, how long ago was it that he left you? And she said, 25 years. So, you know, some people, it just takes longer to have the, you know, to feel like they're able to be vulnerable in a relationship and to trust somebody with their heart. And I said, well, what have you been doing for 25 years? And she said, well, I made Jesus my lover. So that is taking the 12th house to another level, let me tell you. So she did have a Pluto in the 12th house opposing her Venus. So anyway, you know, heartbreak can do a lot of damage for people. It can take lifetimes sometimes to recover from that. So again, this is, you know, right now we're all experiencing the transit. So it's going to trigger every one of our own journeys in terms of our relationships with others, trust issues, attachment issues, you know, anything that connects to that Venus archetype. And I just recently did a reading for a client. I think we can go to the next slide. I'll bring this up. So this we are calling Looking for Love, and the client, her chart is in the center here, and overlap to this chart where are the transits just recently when Venus moved into Scorpio, and that was September 9th. And I'm going to share with you briefly what she shared with me. And I want you to take a look at her chart and find what I'm saying and what she's feeling. So she says to me that she met this guy online and they really connected well. They were communicating about all sorts of things. She felt extremely close to him. You can see that with her Venus in Aquarius, right? Finding love online, conjunct Mercury in Pisces. And she did really put this guy up on a pedestal. She was falling, you know, full on in love with the guy. So this relationship goes on for several months, and finally he's flying to an area near where she lives for business, and so they finally get to see each other in the flesh. And so he comes over and they have a night together, and I would like to say they made love, but they didn't. They just had sex, literally. It was just this very physical thing, and it was very one-sided. And all she could talk about with me, of course, also feeling very empty about the whole thing, was that, Kristin, he didn't even cuddle with me in the morning. So she spent a little more time telling me how she was still royally crushing on the guy. Now you think about North Node in Leo and, falling in love and with something, but, the Venus in Scorpio, actually this occurred right before it shifted into Scorpio, but, she is spending this life really not only learning to see people clearly, she's also learning how to ask for what she needs. That's a very wide Venus square to the nodes with that skip step. And still learning to ask for what she needs. Also still being traumatized by partners that don't give her what she needs, and an absolute imbalance of giving and receiving. So when we see Venus squaring the nodal axis, it can be a time when where souls are overgiving, totally showing up for people and getting dribs and drabs in return. It can be a time where, because Venus is in Scorpio, that a certain side of someone will be exposed and you will be able to see them clearly. It can be a time when something from your past is relived, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when Venus does shift retrograde and square the nodes, but a great deal of the past can come forward at this time. You can hear from people from your past that you didn't expect to hear from for a second, and that is the square to that south node in Aquarius, which is the unexpected. I mentioned earlier too that we have Mars in Aquarius squaring Venus. Mars is sitting on the south node opposing Uranus, and in this chart here it's not quite in Aquarius yet, but it is now, and this will be the theme until the 22nd. Very unpredictable territory, personally, politically, collectively on this planet, and a real corner turning time. And so, when we're dealing with Uranus, you're dealing with Aquarius, it is hard to prepare for anything because that's the nature of the archetype, the unexpected. So my objective with this client was to restate what's really needed for her in this life. I mean, the Pluto in the 12th house in Libra, again, just wanting, not being able to see people clearly or projecting a reality onto others that just doesn't exist. She's got a lot of Piscean Neptune influence here with that Sun in Pisces as well. Moon in Cancer in the 8th house with Mars. Forever she is being thrown back on herself. She's attracting people that can't begin to give her what she needs. And the reason is, and it comes down to then why is that? Her south node in Taurus in the 7th is ruled by that Venus in her 4th in Aquarius that is making that square, that skip step. I mean, she's been giving for lifetimes. And so she's learning how to first give to herself, to not look to someone outside of herself to feel better, to feel whole, to feel complete. She's learning very deep lessons in self-reliance, independence, empowering herself, and ultimately, yes, being able to ask for what she needs, and if she can't get what she needs, then to walk away. Anyway, a very disillusioning experience for her, but one of many in her life. Now, this is someone with this natal signature, and then we overlap it to transits, and it can really come to life all over again. We don't have to have Venus squaring our nodes natally in order to experience the same kind of phenomena. But something is trying to get back into balance in your life. Your soul is trying to establish more balance. Things are out of balance when we see Venus in a square to the nodal axis. Okay, next slide. So when we think about the imbalance of Venus, especially as it relates to that Libran phenomena, there's a need to be needed. So oftentimes, people will attract people they can help, the wounded bird, and then no chance for that soul to get the needs met. During the transit, that's going to really be overemphasized. It's going to become extremely blatant. the giving more than you're getting. Ultimately, a codependency. That person who's giving is dependent on the person that needs them because they need to be needed. It makes them feel like they're giving something of value, and it makes them feel good about themselves. Then they don't have to look at their own issues because they're fixing someone else. There's also an energy of attachment. And as I spoke about with the essential needs diagram, is the expectation that we project onto others. So the needs that we cannot fulfill on our own, we can look to another in hopes that they can fulfill them for us. I want to share something really personal about attachment because I feel like I know a lot about it, being that I'm a twin. I'm a fraternal twin, for those of you that don't know. And twins, not all twins, but a lot of twins are learning about individuation, because there can be a codependency or an attachment that occurs when two souls end up in the same womb together for that long. I wrote about twins in one of the EA books, the book that Rose Marcus spearheaded, but this was not shared in the book. My twin has been very attached to me, and so her journey has been about learning how to individuate and separate from me. And I had 2 children, and for many years she could not have children. And so for 10 years and about $85,000 later, with in vitro costs and still not having a child, she finally came to me and asked me for my eggs. Talk about attachment right there. So all I could imagine was, my eggs mixed with her husband's sperm and put in her body. And everything in my being said no. And it was a really intense time. And it makes me think about Venus, because a lot of times with Venus, people will really care about what other people think. What are they going to say? And if someone has a strong Venus, square the node, strong 7th house, that's going to be a big issue that someone's trying to resolve, learning how to not care about what people think. Anyway, so of course, when I said no, a lot of people were saying, how could your own sister, your own twin even, not share something with you that she was already able to have in her own children? And it was a real difficult time for me to learn this Libra lesson of, and I'm going to share what that is in a moment, but she was actually really good about it. I know that she received the message well, because in her soul she knew that it was the very last thing that she needed. It repeated this theme of attachment and definitely of codependency. And so I told her, I said, just wait, because I experienced her really releasing her attachment or even expectation or hope that maybe she could have a child with my eggs. And as soon as I saw in her eyes her releasing that hold, I told her, just wait, next month you'll probably get pregnant. And you know what? She did. 10 years later, $85,000 poorer. 13 years later, she has a son still, as a result of this incredible turning point relative to attachment. And so one thing I've been learning in my life, I don't have Venus squaring the nodes, but I do have a couple prominent planets in the 7th house. I have been learning this lesson that Jeffrey taught so wisely. It's a Libra lesson. By appearing not to give at times, you are practicing the art of supreme giving by helping another help themselves. There was no way she was going to have a child with my help. There's no way that God would have given her a child, that her own soul would have allowed it to happen, and I certainly wasn't going to let it happen. And so she was still able to have that experience without me. Thrown back on herself, and another leg on her journey and in our journey surrounding this need for individuation. Another Libra word that I think about is expectation, as discussed looking at that essential needs diagram. And it's really natural to expect something from somebody that we are in relationship with, because that's what we do. We give, we receive. So it's not that it's not common. It is common. It's just where we can take those expectations, again, that can lead to conditional giving. I will love you if. But, expectation even exists in the spiritual state. And even advanced souls will experience this emotion of expectation. And I think about this when Yogananda was discussing what happens even in meditation for people that are spiritual seekers that go into a space to connect with God. And he says, when you expect, you don't get. If you expect, you will be waiting a long, long time. And I can validate that well too, in that in going into a sacred space or meditative space, it's also those times when you kind of go kicking and screaming because you're exhausted, or you don't know how you're going to do it because you don't have the energy, or you're not experiencing the breakthroughs that you would like. It's when you go in anyway, without expectation and total surrender, 12th house, Neptune, when you will have the experience that you seek. I'm also reminded of this great story that Kriyananda shared, who was a disciple of Yogananda. And he shares this story about reaching a state of samadhi, just completely plugged in at this ecstatic state of bliss and meditation. And off into the distance, at some point, he can hear in the dining room that the dishes are being cleared, and he can smell dinner. At the same time, he's in this ecstatic state of samadhi. So the Venus part of him is, wanting to make sure he makes it before dinner's cleared. Obviously, the higher octave of Venus, that Neptune, wants to stay connected to God. There was still that temptation, even being in this state of samadhi, of making sure he had that meal, when he was being fed directly from God. And in that state of samadhi, he said, well, to himself, I made it. I got here. I know I can do it again. No problem. And so he comes down out of this meditation, or this state of samadhi, and he makes his way down into the dining room. And he laughs about it because it took him forever and a day to get back to that state again. Very advanced soul. And there was a lesson there. So then the question becomes, where are you going to get fed? How are you going to direct your life in a way that allows you to really be fed until you're full? And again, we all know that when we look outside of ourselves to try and fill that space, it's always replaced with a void or a feeling of emptiness at some point. We will ultimately always be thrown back on ourselves. And that, again, is why that there is that easy breezy sextile to the 12th house in Neptune. We are thrown back on ourselves and being reminded that the only place to experience that feeling of wholeness and connectedness is within and through extension what created us. Another word that I think about relative to Venus is the word justice. And Venus also is the planet of extremity. It takes an extreme to counteract an extreme. We're experiencing that all over the world right now, but definitely in the United States. We are so divided, more divided than I've ever known as being alive on this earth. And we're divided by race, we're divided by culture, we're divided by gender, sexuality, and people are really taking sides, and justice is really in the air, or injustice, I should say. And just recently I was reading about this quarterback for the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers. He used to be the quarterback, Colin Kaepernick, who started the whole thing about not taking a knee during the national anthem. In his mind, this was an act of peaceful protest to remind people in the world that Black lives matter and that Black souls are being gunned down every day in unjust ways, and that people need to know this and that this problem is not fixed. Now, he valued this more than anything else. In fact, there's this enormous sign that's been erected in New York City that says something like, believe in something that is worth sacrificing everything for. A Nike ad. And Nike kept him as a symbol for justice, for risking everything, sacrificing everything for what you believe in. For 2 years, there's been no NFL team that would take him on as a quarterback because of all this drama that's occurred in our country. His Venus is 2954 Scorpio. It trines his north node, his natal north node. So his nodes are in Aquarius and Leo. He's just had a nodal return not very long ago. So justice is a part of this, and you may be experiencing something in your life that connects to perhaps in a workplace where you don't feel like you're being treated fairly, or maybe you're not getting paid, you're a woman and you're not getting paid the same as a guy doing the same job. When I think of Venus squaring the nodes, you know, in Scorpio, there's no more being on the surface about anything. It's about confronting anything that feels unfair or untrue or imbalanced in your life. When Venus is in Scorpio and it's retrograde, squaring the nodes, another thing that can happen as, well, I'll share this slide first. I was just going to mention and a reminder that with the South Node in Aquarius being conjunct Mars in Aquarius, this does connect to unresolved trauma in the past, collectively, personally. The slightest thing can trigger it under this transit. Now, I'm sharing here too that this places a premium on self-reliance from a Taurus point of view when you're looking at Venus squaring the nodes, because Venus does have to do with our survival and our resources and what we need, you know, for a roof over our head and everything else. So maybe this transit's about keeping the job, losing the job, being willing to leave something that's toxic. You know, we are learning how to identify our inner resources that we have that will allow us to survive in our earning. This will also expose the imbalance of giving and receiving in your relationships from a Libra point of view, as I mentioned earlier. Unresolved karmic connections from the past will return. May get a phone call, an email. It's definitely going to trigger themes of trust. Should I trust this person? My body is telling me no. From a spiritual point of view, we are learning that the ultimate relationship is with the source of all things, bar none, bottom line. every time. All right, anybody have any questions so far?
Kristin, I just wanted to say that you can go longer than an hour if you like.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So no questions, yeah.
Kristin, hey, it's Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Hey, I was thinking about somebody that has like Uranus. When you had that woman's chart up, I was thinking about someone with Uranus conjunct Venus, which of course I have, and in relation to this transit. And I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking of lots of things about attachment and codependency and all of those different themes. And, you know, someone that's been out of relationship 25 years, hasn't let someone in, you know, a long time. And then when you decide to go ahead and make the connection and become vulnerable and all of that, I mean, people that have those themes, I mean, part of the way to heal them is to be in relationship.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like a paradox, right? And I'm wondering if maybe you can talk about that some, because I mean, I've stayed for a long time to really take care of myself and connect with myself, but I'm still healing some of these deeper issues that really are only being resolved in relationship.
And they only can be resolved in relationship. And so it is a paradox. And I think the way to understand it and the way to talk with clients about it and the way to inwardly look at it, and I say look at it because the South Node's in Aquarius with Mars in Aquarius. And in that webinar that I did in May, I suggested or encouraged people to imagine that you're observing your life outside of yourself, or you've left this life, right? You're hovering over this life, you're done with this life, and you're observing everything that you went through from an objective point of view now. What are the things that you're going to be wishing you did? Maybe take more risks, allow yourself to open up and love more, and knowing that those were the things needed and required ultimately to evolve. And what happens when we work on our inner wounds and we repair as best we can the traumas that we've experienced, then it allows our own vibration to change. And it really comes down to being okay with or without anybody. I'm not in this relationship out of need. I'm here because I want to be, not because I need to be. And so when you enter a relationship out of desire versus need, then it has a far greater chance of working. So I would say is that, you know, I see clients, I've talked to clients, it seems like lately I've been talking to a lot of women in particular with this signature who have a lot of Taurus energy, moon in Taurus, second house moon, one of the nodes in Taurus. And my response is always, maybe they're out of a relationship now, is that I wouldn't be surprised if you decided you never wanted to be in one again. Because the most important relationship that you have is with yourself. And until you know that you are strong and whole into yourself, you know, then, and at some point that soul is going to re-enter a relationship, whether it's this life or their next life, then you might as well just be hanging out with yourself, you know, and inevitably they all think it's a great idea. It just feels best for them at that point. Now, you're right when you say that the way that you evolve and work through some of these traumas, because they all get triggered in relationship, right? It can take the slightest thing for that other person to trigger the trauma. It's like minefields, you know? And it would take a very patient person, if someone's been through a lot of trauma, to understand that it's not about them. And to help a partner for you, perhaps, help you objectify, you know, maybe a reaction to something. I know it's going to take you time to trust me, but I love you for who you are. I love you no matter what. That's a kind of partner, of course, you would like to pull in.
You know, Kristin, that's very interesting because that's exactly like what I'm learning, and that the reaction is, it's really not about me. I mean, it gives me the opportunity to work on my own stuff, but also learning how not to react. And also, oh God, now I forget what it was. It was something that you mentioned. Oh, about expectations. You know, I came into all this consciousness stuff through 12-step communities, and their saying is expectations are premeditated resentments.
Mm.
And it always turns out that way. Most of
Wow. Expectation is just the greatest killer, man, of relationships, right? It just, oh. Yeah. Well, the thing is that right now, this transit's going to bring it all up. And we're including the interrelationship we have with ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, even when we're in a relationship. And I really just want to encourage people to use that Mars in Aquarius as soon as you feel yourself starting to act or expect, to really try and observe yourself like you're watching yourself on a stage. And, you know, I want to change what this character does now. And so, you know, it's impossible at times when we're held captive by the emotion of attachment or expectation or having some legitimate need. And, you know, I just got an email from somebody who was just reeling about, you know, she's just been through a really big breakup that needed to happen. The very last thing she needs is to be back in that relationship that was just totally not functioning. Dysfunctional is what it was. And yet she was missing having that relationship, that partnership. And so there was this just intense focus again on reminding her to invert her energy. Venus retrograde through transit is going to be a very reflective time, really asking ourselves, you know, what do I need? How do I experience balance in a relationship ultimately? And how am I asking for what I need enough? Am I clear about that? Or am I letting those lines get really fuzzy? So that's what the Venus retrograde will allow for, will allow even the themes surrounding expectations. When we attach to nothing, we just find joy in being in a space with someone we love. There's just so much more fluidity that happens. It's amazing when we have a certain emotion, how it just automatically manifests in the next moment, right? Even that feeling of expectation, like you shared. So it's almost like it, when we have that emotion, there's no way something won't go wrong, because it comes from this feeling of, it's like a projection. It's that inconjunct to the second house, which is one of lack, something's missing. And anytime a relationship is energized with something lacking, something broken, the partner picks up on that. So obviously communication is going to be vital in the next 2 months. But reflection has to happen first. Deep reflection. I'm just not getting what I need, and I don't think I ever will with this person. So having the courage to say, I would rather be alone than miserable and married, in some cases. So I'm going to go to the next. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, we have a question in the chat from Christina.
Okay.
She's asking about the connection with relationships and money. When money enters into relationship dynamics, there is a survival mechanism that triggers. I seem to have this as a repeating pattern with my nodes in Taurus, Scorpio, and Venus in Scorpio. And actually, when money isn't involved, I feel out of control.
Wow. Which node is which? The South node in Taurus or the South node in Scorpio?
I'll let you know. South node in Taurus.
So this is, and then North Node in Taurus as well as, North Node in Scorpio as well as Venus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what this represents, when we talk about the Taurus-Scorpio axis, and I would have to see the whole chart of hers, so maybe she can email me at a later time, but
Venus is conjunct the North Node.
okay, so the ruler of the South Node is conjunct the North Node. When we're looking at the Taurus-Scorpio axis, this is the frog in the well. The frog is literally trying to leave the well and seeing the whole totality of the sky. It's about also merging with others, Scorpio style, right? Not being so fixated and fixed on our resources and on the material world. So she's learning, and ultimately she is learning how to lose control. When you deal with Scorpio, it's all or nothing. It's go big or go home, go all the way or no way. Nothing is more intense, nothing is more total, nothing is more deeply intimate, all encompassing than Scorpio. Yet there's a fear around that. You will lose control with Scorpio. It comes with the turf and the territory. But for her, this is directly linked to her fear of survival. It becomes very basic. It could be, too, that she was betrayed by someone that she loved, that she trusted with her money. And again, I'd have to see the whole chart. But, our survival is important. I don't want to say that, just toss out the second house and run to the 12th. We all need certain basic needs to be met. And we all have a past linked to what it means to survive. And so, in a nutshell, these are themes around being betrayed by somebody that she trusted and was left holding the bag. Total violation of trust. And it is going to be hard for her to trust someone if her own survival was on the line last time. And maybe she perished. Maybe she didn't ultimately survive. And so that was a great example. It can feel like money is making something a bad thing. It's creating a lot of what appears to be irrational emotion from another person's point of view. But this is her soul's reality. And if her life was on the line, and if it was life or death, then it's as real as it ever was or is. Because all those memories are living in her cells. So ultimately, she will need to learn to trust another and to be able to fuse with another. It may not happen in this lifetime, but it's something she has been working on because the ruler of her South Node is conjunct her North Node, and she will be pulling in people who have betrayed her, people she shouldn't be trusting, but it can also be a time where she can ultimately connect with someone that she can trust. I'd have to see everything in the chart and the transits and all of that, but thank you for your question, Christina. Can we go to the next slide?
Yes, we're on the next slide now.
Okay, so in looking at Venus retrograde, and when it's exactly squaring the nodes, this is this theme of skip steps we talk a lot about in evolutionary astrology. And I already shared this weekend that Venus will be squaring the nodes, but in Scorpio, but it won't be retrograde yet. The retrograde is about reflection. It is repeating the past, returning to the past. When it moves into a position where it's squaring the nodal axis in what we call a skip step, and this is a place where your soul is getting stuck. These both examples with Wendy and Christina were great examples, two totally different stories, but there's a myriad of examples, whether it comes down to money or to love or to trust, what's fair, what's just, what's balanced. Also, it can create a feeling of not knowing or fearing whether somebody should leave or not. With Venus squaring the nodes, it can be somebody who's afraid of hurting another person. I've been married to this person for so many years. What will happen to them if I leave this marriage, even though my needs aren't getting met? So it becomes this fence-sitting reality, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And maybe in some cases, of course, the soul is given so much of themselves, that's all that they've ever done, that to even begin to ask for what they need, it makes them feel guilty. And you can see that through the natural square from Libra to Capricorn. I feel guilty to get my own needs met. And this is just an old tape that needs to be rewritten. The soul can't move forward until what is surfacing under this transit is addressed and dealt with. And if it isn't dealt with this time, it's just going to be hanging out there waiting to be dealt with again. It doesn't mean, that you stop living. It just means that there's a core theme in your life that until that is confronted or unearthed, confronted, and dealt with, it's going to be keeping you from evolving in the way that you would like. And I say here too that ultimately this will be a deep review of the choices that you've made in the past leading up into this point. Knowing that you made those choices, what choices can change now so you do get your needs met? Did those choices lead to an experience where you got what you needed? And if the answer is no, then this Venus squaring the nodes will be a time to liberate yourself with a new choice. All right, you can go to the next slide. A few more notes. And I've already said this a few times, but of course it is a relive and an opportunity to resolve old karma. And you're going to feel it in your bones, in your blood, in your being. You are going to feel it. It will be intense. And even if it doesn't appear intense, a circumstance, you will be feeling it inside yourself in a deeply visceral and very critical way. You will know that there's something in your life that is getting in the way of where you want to go. And of course, making new choices in the face of an old dynamic that has caused you repeated suffering and pain. And that feeling of just not either getting what you need or giving so much you have nothing left. This is such an important time, looking at the second house relative to Venus, to trust in what you feel you know to be true. Who cares what anybody else thinks or feels about it? That's a Venus square the nodes where we all get tripped up. What will they think? What will she think? What are they going to say about it? Who cares? What do you want to do about it? And it is definitely about having the courage with Mars and Aquarius here in this on the South Node to do something different. To change your tune, to change your own inner relationship to yourself, your own inner magnetism, so that you can start attracting a different sort of reality. And Wendy, in your question about unresolved trauma or trauma in the past and relationships, it really is about continuing to work on your own inner signal. And as soon as you're going to be able to tell if it's working, I mean, really the more you tune in and turn in, it is like a tuning fork, this Venus phenomena. You can observe through the relationships that you begin to attract that look different and feel different, that you're changing. That's how we know. Direct result by what we are drawing into our life. It will tell you it will tell you then that whatever you're doing is working. To keep doing it. Okay, next slide. So Venus also has to do with how we earn, what holds meaning and value in terms of our own natural design, our thumbprint. South Node in Aquarius is about our own individuality. And there may have been a fear around expressing your own individuality. It doesn't fit into what other people think is the right thing to do, or how society might receive it or view it. And maybe you're in a relationship or you're married and you're needing to bring in a certain amount of money, so there could be fear around, how am I going to provide if I leave this mundane thing and do what I really love to do? There's a lot of things up relative to this square. But it is so much about the need for you to do what your soul, Venus and Scorpio, is designed to do and bring and give to this world. So you're back in better balance, so the world can be in better balance, one person at a time, one soul at a time, like a pebble in a pond. Just do your part. And when we honor our nature and honor what is natural, then the world does rise to meet us. Venus retrograde in Scorpio, of course, can create an energy where you are encountering power plays with others who betrayed you in the workplace, or people who have, I mentioned here, stolen your ideas. Or, for example, you have this great Aquarian idea, innovative idea, and you've shared it with somebody else, and someone usurps it, takes it, claims it. This is a real theme. It happens all the time. So keeping some of those ideas close to the vest might be a good idea. Definitely a time for you to recover your power, Venus and Scorpio, male or female alike. It could be a time when men are, in relationships with very powerful women, like really castrating, a castration theme, or just feeling like no matter what they do, it's just not enough. This really Scorpio, karmic, fated turn for them as well. And maybe it's really too about the need to actualize more of the feminine energy within themselves, that Venus energy. Remember that Venus and the moon are the only two female symbols in our solar system. Everything else is male. We have Venus squaring the nodes, which are lunar symbols, moon. So much woman here. And that leads me to my next slide. On November 6th, 2018, the US has a midterm election, and women who have never been involved in politics are showing up in historic numbers to run for office, because we are have totally reached an extreme in this country. Democrats and Republicans alike, women, both sides, many more Democrats, I might add. Look at the chart for this day. It is crazy. We've got transiting Pluto, conjunct south node of Saturn, south node of Pluto. The nodes just shift into Cancer, Capricorn, with Venus retrograde squaring the nodes and opposing Uranus. It takes an extreme to counteract an extreme. There will be an extreme swing on this day, I predict, I pray. Jupiter in Scorpio, 29 degrees, perfect trine to the north node in Cancer, woman. And what we have learned with the nodes, the south and the north nodes of all those outer planets, or all the ones in Cancer and Capricorn, the north node of Pluto, the north node of Jupiter, the north node of Saturn in Cancer, conjunct the transiting north node, Cancer, woman. We have to go back to matriarchal principles in order to move forward. Cardinal. We've got to go back to our mother roots in order to go forward. And so I wanted to mention this relative to this transit on a political or collective level, because whatever happens in the US does affect the world. That is going to be an interesting time. Okay, any questions on the slide that we had relative to our creative life purpose linked with the North Node in Leo with Venus squaring the nodes, or anything else that's come up that somebody'd like to ask?
Yes, Kristin, I'd like to ask about the transiting nodes squaring the natal nodes. I have my south natal node is in Scorpio, and it's conjunct my natal Mercury. But there's square the transiting nodes.
So yeah, anytime you see the transiting nodes squaring your natal nodes, it is an evolutionary transition in time where, and again, I'd have to see the whole chart and what your soul's intentions are for this. But this is a little bit like a turnstile in time where you're in the parking lot on your way into an event. When you walk through those turnstiles?
Yeah.
the reality in the parking lot is very different than the reality at the event. And so your soul is going through this transition of a changing reality, emotionally changing reality, and a reality that your soul is trying to manifest as a result of the square, trying to propel you forward. Now, the square can create a feeling of being stuck because it's, it kind of hovers, and it does retrograde, comes forward a little bit and back and forth. So there's a transition. And Venus squaring the transiting nodes is going to bring up everything that you value and what you need in order to make this transition manifest. Is there a question relative to that square or something that's up in your life right now specific to what you think that's about that you can share?
Well, I've just really in the last year become quite relatively happy about being alone at home in my house. And I go out occasionally, but I'm really very content 90% of the time doing my studying, and my different experienced astrologers have said, well, Uranus is crossing your ascendant, you're to go out in the world. And I've seen myself different aspects and things that show that I need to go out. And it's like, I don't feel stuck. I just want to sit on my couch and study and pet my cat.
Well, I think that's a beautiful thing. I love being home too with my big dog. He looks like a cat, but he's like a lion, more like.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that there's something really beautiful about being able to find joy and peace without needing to be out in the world, for sure. But what I would say to you about the transiting nodes and the North Node in Leo being so much about the heart and sharing your heart, your wisdom, whatever it is that you are learning through all of your studies, that when you do share it with others, it doubles the feeling, it triples the feeling.
Periodically, people do come to me, and it's very strange because I'm socially awkward, but people do come to me and sit on my flower couch and talk about their lives and ask about not exactly what I think, because I'm a channel, I'm a medium, and they know that. They know that the information I put out comes from a different place than me and my screw-uppedness. So I could do more of that from...
I love that idea. And, the transiting nodes are going to shift into Cancer and Capricorn. So the transiting North Node shifts into Cancer. The chart up right now shows Venus is no longer retrograde there on November 28th, but it is squaring those nodes again, opposing Uranus. So this really speaks to how you can give to others from your home with the North Node in Cancer, based on what you know. And so there's still a way to reach people from your home. I mean, what I would say is don't try not to listen to what other people are telling you need to do. Continue to tune into what you feel you need. Continue to honor that natural space of being at home with your cat, and allow yourself to really feed off of that. I mean, that's a really nurturing environment for you. But yet also to take it a step further, and maybe like you've already done, to open your home to others, because it really will double, triple the feeling. Okay. And then you are making this world better because you're in it.
Thank you, Kristin.
You're welcome. Okay, Linda, what time do we need to stop?
The meeting after you was cancelled, so you can keep going if you wish.
Okay. I wanted to, well, let me just, before I say any more, if there's anybody else who has a question, they can go ahead and ask. I'm just trying to find this. There we go. Any more questions? And if not, then I'll just continue a bit more and then close.
Kristin, I had a question as far as the Venus square the nodes. Would this, especially being retrograde in Scorpio, would this emphasize the have and have-nots?
Definitely. I'm glad you brought that up, because Venus is definitely about comparing yourself to others and comparing what you have and what somebody else has. That's the nature of Venus. That's even how we learn about relationships. When you're looking at the seventh house linked with the second house linked with the seventh house, and you're experiencing yourself in different relationships, you're comparing this person to that person, how you feel with this person or that person. Do they give me what I need? Does this person give me what I need or not? And Venus is definitely about comparing yourself to others, or comparing what you have to what other people have. And so that is definitely a theme that will come up. And is that what you were referring to?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Is that something going on in your life, or is it just more about wanting to know about this transit?
Mainly just just knowing about the transit. Now, I do have this theme emphasized in my transit because I have the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio with Venus in Aquarius squaring the nodes. So that was what was popping in my mind as I've been listening to you.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'm thinking, this makes me think about a time before I got into this work. I was really in the very beginning stages of this work, I would say. And I was part of a book club. And I had chosen a book called Threads. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's a reincarnation fantasy. And we were having a discussion about the book after the meeting. And many of the people in the group I shouldn't say many, at least half of them had a Catholic background and did not believe in past lives. And we got in this heated discussion about whether past lives exist or not. And I finally had a way of silencing them. And this is very early on. It was just something, I was not raised with any of this. It's just when I found evolutionary astrology, every hair on my body was standing straight up. I just got the chills. Everything I heard felt like it was my truth. It felt true, right? We can't, belief does not, the truth does not require belief, is what I wanted to say. And so what I shared with these women was that what is the fairness, or where is the fairness? How would a loving God allow some people to be born in Watts or in the Bronx, or where is it in New York City that's so challenging? Is it the Bronx or Harlem? And yet you were allowed to be born high on the hill somewhere. So this is the whole thing around comparing, right? Or who's got what. And it was this really intense discussion. It was very much a Venus discussion, and what's fair and not fair, and how could a loving God give this person a good life and that person not a good life. And then it was incredible because I was very fresh into this work, but I was so passionate about this because I care so much about what's fair. I mean, that is my biggest trigger, is injustice. I mean, it could send me to the moon and back. And so I had an incredible discussion following that with a handful of women that were just blown away that they'd actually never even thought about that. This was many years ago. But the other thing to point out when you're working with clients is that all souls attract exactly the life that they need in order to evolve. Whether they're poor and living in some third world country, or living in some high rise in New York City. And we're all in a state of becoming. This is not our only chance, our only life. And if we are comparing what we have to what we don't, at times it can energize efforts to try and have what we don't. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. If we can control any of that, that's part of it. This is what I value. I don't have that, but I want that. And so I'm going to work to try and acquire that, or accomplish this, or actualize that. So Venus will really speak to what holds meaning and value to you. And the more we do evolve, then the less of the stuff is going to matter. The thing that really will hold value to you are the things that you experience within yourself. The connection you feel to a child or to a loved one, or just or in a space of meditation. That's the stuff that will feed you forever. But Venus will definitely bring up those material things even that you feel like you may want or need. Remember, Venus is so much about Earth on many levels and what we need to feel good here. A touch, a song, a meal, a roof over our head, things like that. But ultimately, the goal is to actualize that higher octave of Venus or go deeper, further. And that can only happen when we turn in and tune in. I recently wrote a quote. It was a tagline for Cancer, and I shared it here at one of the last slides, but it's, when you go within, you will never be without. And that really, that is all, that's what it's all about, ultimately. And oh, this brings me to this beautiful quote. Sri Yukteswar, who is Yogananda's guru, and in Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda's sharing a conversation that he has with him. And he says he'd left the ashram, and Yogananda said, "Master, I must have disappointed you by my abrupt departure from my duties here. I thought you might be angry with me." Yukteswar says, "No, of course not. Wrath springs only from thwarted desires. I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. I would not use you for my own ends. I am happy only in your own true happiness." Yogananda says, "Sir, one hears of divine love in a vague way, but today I am indeed having a concrete example of it from your angelic self. In the world, even a father does not easily forgive his son if he leaves his parents' business, but you show not the slightest vexation, though you must have been put to great inconvenience by the many unfinished tasks that I left behind." We looked into each other's eyes where tears were shining. A blissful wave engulfed me. I was conscious that the Lord, in the form of my guru, was expanding the limited ardors of my heart to reach vast reaches of cosmic love. And so this quote, "I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. I would not use you for my own ends. I am only happy in your own true happiness." This is the most evolved version of the word expectation I can imagine, or not having any. And this, of course, is a challenge for anybody to not expect anything from others. But it was a beautiful passage from Autobiography of a Yogi, and I often refer to it in my life. I think about it. I want to be more like that. And so I'm hoping that you feel the same way and will remember this as well. It does create an energy, when we remove that emotion of expectation. It just opens things up, creates a space that prevents, more pain and challenge with others. So it ultimately does come back to counting on yourself, being whole into yourself, and connecting to that which created you. All right, any last questions before I... Oh, yes. When you go within, you will never be without. And by accessing the 12th house in Neptune, Venus's higher octave. Yeah, I will love you if becomes I will love you always.
Russ is trying to ask a question, but Russ, if you want to type it into the chat, I'll ask it for you. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, in the signature of Pluto transiting somebody's Venus retrograde, and then the transiting Venus is going to conjunct my Pluto. Is there any like insight that you have on that? Just like general insight.
So what you're saying is your Pluto is conjuncting their.
Okay. Can you hear?
I'll rephrase. Oh.
Hey, Linda?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to try and answer that question quickly. Maybe he can hear me, but
I can clear up what I was saying.
Okay, go ahead. So I think you said your Pluto's on her Venus. Her Venus is on your Pluto. Is that right?
No, what I'm saying is the transiting Pluto right now is conjunct my Venus retrograde.
Oh, okay.
And where transiting Venus is going to conjunct my Pluto when it goes retrograde as well.
Okay, so you were born with Venus retrograde. A lot of the relationships that you are pulling in are unresolved relationships from the past. They have a lot of karmic energy connected to them, but also this is about you're in a relationship predominantly with yourself and a focus on that. When Pluto conjuncts a natal Venus retrograde, it's a very intense transit. Pluto has not been here in 248 years. This is definitely about eliminating the relationships in your life that do not serve you. It can also be a time when themes of betrayal and fears of loss and abandonment, of course, surface. And so if somebody else has another agenda, or somebody else doesn't want the same things that you do, or your needs are not what another needs, then this will definitely be shown to you. So this is going to be a period in your life where you will evolve through, it is a period of death and rebirth. It doesn't mean you are going to die, but parts of you may die, old parts that you don't want anymore. It definitely is a theme of loss, and I'm not, I don't like to predict exits, but oftentimes I do see with Pluto on a Venus or a Mars or on an ascendant, then people can lose people that they love, but typically because it's a slow-moving transit, it's not a surprise. Could be like a grandparent or what have you, but more often than not, Russ, it's really about your need to experience some relationships that are very karmic in nature, and if they are not meant to be in your life, then they will be eliminated. Either you're eliminating them or they're eliminating the relationship with you. So are you going through anything like that now? Are you in a relationship where you feel like things are on the edge?
Yeah, I'm going through multiple of those things that you said. My grandma literally just went to the hospital yesterday as well.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want you to know that.
No, it's all good. I appreciate it.
Well, I wanted you to know that that when you clear the fire swamp, as they say, I mean, that is the most empowering transit, one of the most empowering transits on the other side. It will allow you to evolve emotionally. It will allow your inner relationship to yourself to evolve. It will allow you to bring more of yourself to your relationships because of this transit. And it is through this experience of loss or any kind of cataclysm that you have an opportunity to really emerge from the ashes and be twice what you were because of it. And so just, walk through the fire and know that you are eliminating layers of old, and you can come out and through the other side stronger and more empowered than you were on the way in, and more connected to the people that you love. You will be able to bring a lot more to the table. That is for sure. All right, Linda.
I feel that on a deep level. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So, Kristin, will you take any more questions at this point?
I'll take one more if there's one more.
Okay, Wendy, go ahead.
I just thought of this when I was listening to the last question. Someone mentioned to me that in the, I guess it's an article that Jeffrey wrote, the Uranus, Freedom from the Unknown, I think that's what it's called or something.
Freedom from the known.
Oh, yeah, that he correlated Uranus conjunct Venus as somewhat similar to having a Venus retrograde.
Yes.
Do you know if that's true? Uh-huh.
Definitely. And that's because Uranus, or the retrograde archetype, carries a Uranian kind of quality. All the retrogrades, if you have any planet retrograde, it's like, it has this Uranian vibe because it's all about rebelling and not conforming, right, to mainstream reality. And so were you thinking about the Uranus conjunct your Venus and that feeling like that might be a Venus retrograde? Is that what you were asking?
Well, this is an astrologer, I think, that studied with Jeffrey, and she said that to me. And yeah, I was thinking, I mean, I have Venus conjunct, I have Uranus, Pluto, Venus. So
wow.
It's pretty loaded. Square the node.
What he really meant, though, Wendy, is that if you have a retrograde planet that's not in Aquarius, so let's say someone has Saturn retrograde in the sign of Scorpio, then it's going to carry a Uranian quality because it's retrograde.
Yeah.
It's so really more that.
Not so much conjunct the Uranus, yeah.
So, because the retrograde really is about returning to something. And so he really meant it in the way I said it.
Thank you for clarifying, because I never found it in that reading. And I don't really orient to Venus retrograde so much. I have enough art to deal with.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't work in the way that you were saying.
Okay. Thank you.
That. But also, I would say is that, is your Pluto, Uranus, Venus, are they all balsamic?
Yeah, it's Uranus is 13, Pluto's 15, and Venus is 18. My nodes are at 11. So Uranus is what's, they're all balsamic. Venus is new phase.
Yeah, Venus is new phase.
Yeah.
So that again, there's no retrograde on your Venus. That Uranus does not make your Venus retrograde. So
good.
You are culminating unresolved trauma from the past, definitely through that Pluto Uranus balsamic. But the Pluto Venus new phase is also like you can see through the loose threads right in your eyes. You can see the hope of the future, the light of the future through those threads that you're trying to culminate, and you're really straddling. It's kind of like straddling the 12th house, first house.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a life of transition where there's culmination and closure and new beginnings. So not Venus retrograde, no.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Okay. Well, gosh, that was great to be with everybody today. I hope you guys got something out of all of this, and I really enjoyed sharing some of Venus with you, and I will continue to write about it in my weekly forecasts, and I will be writing about it in my newsletter, and we'll probably be talking about it on the radio show. So if any of you have any questions, just reach out to me, and if you have any questions about today, I'd be happy to follow up with you at some point by email.
Kristin, thank you so much. That was just excellent. Would you all please thank Kristin Fontana?
Thanks, guys.
Kristin. It's Tashi. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great meeting.
Oh, I love all the pictures.
Thank you, Kristin. See you next time. Bye, everyone.
All right, Linda. Thanks.
Bye.